Hello all, I am Evan. I am a research fellow at the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, where I work on doing AI safety research, specifically targeted at inner alignment and amplification. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do, how I got here, some of the sorts of things that happened in my career and things that can sort of potentially be pointers to other people. So I sort of got into, I'll start in high school because that's sort of where I got into rationality. I read the sequences on Less Wrong and was sort of engaged somewhat with sort of what was going on in AI safety, but not really following it. I was also doing a lot of functional programming, software engineering stuff. I went to college. I got really into effective altruism, and I ran the effective altruism club at my undergraduate institution, Harvey Mudd College. And while I was doing this, I was sort of also getting sort of understanding more about effective altruism and like how I might be able to use my sort of own career to do something good, which is not something I had really thought about up until that point, but sort of effective altruism is really good for getting me to sort of like think about what I could start doing. And then I attended an EA Global, which is, as you may know, a sort of event similar to this one, where lots of effective altruists from lots of different places are sort of invited to come to this conference. And I met a bunch of people from MIRI, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, and they invited me to go attend a workshop. So I attended the first ARCS workshop, AI Risk for Computer Scientists, which is not happening anymore due to the pandemic, probably will resume after that. It's something you can apply to. I attended the workshop, tried to sort of got more introduced to AI safety arguments, thinking through more what was sort of going on in the field. And I also applied sort of as a result of the workshop to do an internship at MIRI while I was sort of still doing my undergrad. And in the internship, I did a bunch of software engineering stuff, specifically functional programming stuff. So MIRI does a lot of functional programming, sort of Haskell and type theory stuff. And so I did a lot of that while I was interning at MIRI. I don't actually do that stuff anymore, but it was really useful for me in terms of getting sort of a foot in the door, trying to sort of meet people, understand what's going on in the field. And at the same time, I also got a chance while I was doing that internship to attend the MIRI Summer Fellows Program, which is another program that's sort of not happening right now, but hopefully will continue after the pandemic, which is a sort of multi-week long research retreat for people who want to try to figure out how to do research in AI safety problems, how to sort of get started trying to understand and make progress on sort of doing their own research. And I attended MSFP, and while I was there, I sort of got very interested in this problem at the time. People are calling it the sort of optimization demons problem. Now we would refer to it as inner alignment. And the term inner alignment came from and the result of a paper that I ended up writing with co-authors that I met at MSFP. And so we at MSFP sort of figured out that we were interested in this problem of what happens when you have models that are trained on an objective, but that aren't actually trying to achieve the objective they were trained on and instead learn some other objective. And so we wrote this paper over the course of the next year or so called Risks of Learned Optimization in Advanced Machine Learning Systems. And this was sort of pretty well received. And as a result of the paper, I got a chance, I was sort of invited to apply to work with Paul Cristiano at OpenAI. And so after I finished my undergrad, I applied to OpenAI and I did an internship at OpenAI doing research sort of on similar sort of inner alignment stuff with Paul Cristiano. And that was really great. I got a chance to sort of really learn more about sort of how to do research from Paul, and really sort of got a chance to get into the sort of feel of doing my own research. A lot of writing in my notebook, coming up with ideas, bringing them to Paul, sort of bouncing things around. A couple of sort of interesting things came out of that. And when that was finished, I was offered a position at MIRI, a sort of full-time researcher position, which is what I'm currently doing. And the research that I'm doing at MIRI is sort of, in many ways, very similar to the research that I did at OpenAI. So I'm doing a lot of sort of thinking about how would we really address this inner alignment problem? How might we craft training processes that are able to ensure that we produce models that are actually trying to achieve what we are trying to train the model to achieve, sort of reward function or loss function, whatever, ensure that the models are actually trying to minimize that loss or sort of maximize that reward. This is sort of a very general problem, and it's one I've written a lot about, spent a lot of time thinking about, but a lot of sort of what I do now just looks like sort of similar to what I was doing at OpenAI, working in my notebook, trying to do some sort of combination of math and just sort of thinking more broadly, trying to understand how to sort of plot a course forward to address this sort of very large and daunting problem in AI safety. Yeah, and that's sort of how I got here, what I do, a little bit about me. Hope that was helpful.
Hello, everyone. My name is Markus Anderljung, and I work as a project manager at the Center for the Governance of AI at the Future of Humanity Institute, which is part of the University of Oxford. I'll just give you sort of a brief story of my career and then try as best I can to offer some advice that may or may not be helpful to you. I grew up in Sweden, and from sort of a pretty early age, I got excited about two things. The first one was philosophy, and the second one was that I should dedicate my life to alleviating climate change. At sort of the age of 18, I ended up doing philosophy at Cambridge. So this sort of first thing ended up coming true. And it was there that I first heard about effective altruism in the context of hearing about giving what we can. And then sort of over the next few years, while still sort of pursuing my goal of working as a campaigner at Greenpeace, I got gradually more involved with the Cambridge Give What We Can group, spending my final year there as its president. In doing so, I gradually became convinced that I shouldn't spend my time on climate change issues, primarily because of arguments regarding sort of neglectedness and those kinds of things. After the fact, I think that sort of what I ended up working on was more important than these climate change issues. And so I think it was sort of good that I ended up giving up on this sort of initial dream. On the other hand, I think I kind of made a mistake when I first changed my mind about whether I should work on those issues, because I think there was a stint where I thought that sort of working on global poverty issues was sort of more important than working on these climate change issues. And I, at least now, think that I shouldn't have made that leap. And that, like, from sort of my sort of slightly sort of long-termist views, it probably would have been better to focus on certain narrow climate change interventions instead of on these global poverty interventions. I think part of what was happening there was that when I first heard about effective altruism, I think the main thing that happened to me was I got very, very excited about seeing this group of people who were really trying to answer a question that I've been trying to answer sort of myself, but I didn't really have others to sort of discuss them with. And so this was this question of sort of how can I actually maximize my impact? How can I sort of put my sort of long-termist, I guess I didn't have that word at that point, but my sort of long-termist values into practice. And so I think because of that, I ended up sort of deferring more to other people's views who sort of seemed smart and seemed to be making decisions on similar grounds to what I myself would have wanted to make decisions on. But I think in this case, that maybe sort of made me make a bit of a mistake. After university, my then partner and I, we decided to move back to Sweden. In terms of sort of my career, I guess this limited my career options somewhat. And so because of that, and also because of sort of being quite unsure about what I ought to do with my sort of career, about my cause prioritization, etc., I ended up spending a few years doing management consulting, sort of building a career capital. Yeah, after the fact, I think had I stayed in the UK, it would probably have been better to spend time on something else. Maybe sort of build expertise in sort of a particular cause area that I thought was likely to become important over the next few years. However, I guess I found it, sort of the management consulting thing, a lot more interesting than I thought it would, and it was like a lot more useful for learning. than I thought it would. I guess primarily through being sort of thrown into the deep end sort of over and over again in a lot of different projects, I think was like a very useful learning experience. I also think that doing the sort of management consulting thing was a decent alternative because it ended up, it's the kind of thing where you get roughly the same sort of amount of career capital no matter where you sort of do the work. There's also this other nice feature, which is that Sweden is a sort of a land where work-life balance matters a lot and people care about it. And so this meant that I was able to be a part of founding Effective Altruism Sweden while working a job that in the UK or the US would have had me work like 60-hour weeks, which would have sort of left me with the bandwidth to do that kind of thing. Yeah, after about sort of 2 years in that role, I started to feel like my sort of learning curve was starting to taper off. And so I started to sort of look around for other options. I applied some sort of remote jobs at EA organizations, but none of them really worked out. And then instead, I ended up applying and sort of getting funding to work for EA Sweden full-time, which was a really exciting experience. Another example of this, of sort of like really being thrown into the deep end of getting some money and then just like trying to figure out how to do sort of the best I could with what time I had to sort of build this community. Which, yeah, since I've left has grown and done a lot of amazing things, which I'm very excited about. And sort of after a while in that role, I ended up thinking that I should look at roles in the UK and the US instead of just staying in Sweden, because I thought I would be able to have a sort of a bigger impact if I went to those countries, or sort of a country that is, I guess, larger and therefore has potentially more influential organizations around. I looked for roles that I thought could sort of utilize my combination of sort of a management consultant skill set, but also someone who could sort of engage with research as well, that like maybe an organization like FHI might want to do. I applied for like a fairly large number of roles and ended up in my current role at the Center for the Governance of AI. Where I spend my days basically doing whatever is needed to sort of meet the organizational goals of GovAI. So I do what's needed for us to produce a bunch of really, really exciting, high quality research, and finding researchers who can do that research, and finding ways to sort of upskill people who can go into other organizations in the AI governance space and having a big impact there. And so in practice, this means I spend time on things like recruitment, on research management, engaging with policymakers, finances, and all those kinds of things. Going forward, I'm not entirely sure what will happen. I guess that's part of the fun. My current view is that I've found a domain and sort of a role that fits my skill set really well, and that I'm sort of also starting to build up some meager sort of expertise in this area, and so it's useful for me to utilize that fact basically. And so I think I'm likely to sort of stay in this sort of AI governance space, broadly speaking, for the next the foreseeable future, basically. Yeah, that's sort of a broad introduction to what I've spent my life doing. Feel free to send me an email or whatever if you're interested in talking more about it. I thought I'd wrap up with some sort of advice, which I think, giving advice can be really hard because different people, they need to hear different things. And I think it's like particularly hard if I'm giving it sort of to a screen that's right in front of me because I have no idea what you need to do, what you need to hear. What I do know is what I think my past self would have needed to hear. And so I guess I'll just say some of those things and then maybe that will be helpful to you. But treat this all with sort of a bit of caution. The first one is living up to the principles of effective altruism can sometimes be quite hard, and that's okay. You might suffer from sort of fear of missing out on maximizing utility, or what I usually call FOMOMO. This is sort of an expression that I've been trying to make happen for a while now. Maybe this is sort of the time to make it happen. And I think this will make you feel like you're maybe not doing as much good as you should, or as you potentially could. I think this feeling can, in some sense, be helpful in that it sort of pushes you to do more good and sort of not settle or something like this. But I think it also can be like quite counterproductive in that sort of it can get you down. It can make you sort of less excited about the work you're doing. It can make you question what you're doing at every moment in time. To sort of counteract some of those things going on, I've found it helpful to sort of pre-commit or sort of explicitly say to myself, at this point, at this time, that's when I get to think about what I should do with my career next. And so maybe when you start a new thing, decide like, okay, I'm going to spend like 6 months making this thing work. And then after that, I'll like reconsider or figure out what's next for me. The next thing is sort of being more confident and ambitious. I've personally struggled a lot with sort of imposter syndrome, being worried that I'm not good enough or smart enough to get important things done in the world. And this has sometimes made me less ambitious and like kept me from reaching my goals. And I don't really know what to do about it other than telling my past self that this is a thing and it's a thing that you should like start accepting a little bit more about your psychology. And I guess the other thing is sort of recognizing that I think I have, and I think a lot of other people have this pattern where you start a new thing or sort of end up in a new context. At first, you feel like you have no idea what's going on and that you're partly doing a terrible job, and soon everyone will find out that this is the case. And then with time, this feeling kind of settles. And it ends up being the case that you believe that, at least in my case, it's not that I believe that I know a lot more than I did previously. To some extent, I believe that, but primarily what's going on is I start believing that others don't know what's going on either. And that can be quite helpful to just like realize that that's a thing that's gonna happen with my mind. The next thing is to like properly think through what you should do with your career. I think in my case, it took longer for me than would have been useful to internalize the fact that my career is like the most important asset that I have. And I should think really carefully about how to spend it. I think when I made my first career decision after university, it's not implausible that I spent more time thinking about where donations should go than where my career should go. And I think that was just like quite off. And then the last bit of advice is sort of keep trying to figure out how you can have the most impact in the world. Keep reading, keep discussing, keep like engaging with these ideas. Properly engaging with the question of like, how can I do the most good and have the biggest impact in the world is both the most important and the most exciting and intellectually rewarding thing that I've ever engaged with in my life. And I think that's a really, really important fact to remember and to sort of keep top of mind and keep engaging with all these exciting ideas. Because not only is it exciting, it's also ends up being very, very important.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here today to share some lessons from my career journey. My name is Jeanmaire, and I currently oversee strategic research and partnerships at the Center for Human Compatible AI at the University of California, Berkeley. Each day, I'm very involved in drafting policy proposals to ensure the safety and reliability of AI technologies, as well as helping to run the day-to-day operations of my organization. So you might ask, what is it like concretely? Both at Berkeley and in my previous role at the Future Society, my job included 3 main responsibilities. Number 1, AI policy research and engagement with policymakers. For example, I led the development of our response when the White House released guidance for regulation of AI applications earlier this year. So this involved extensive writing and editing. It also included working with a team of collaborators from other organizations, such as the Future of Life Institute, the Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity, and the Future Society. Another part of this policy engagement includes research and authoring articles, contributing to advancing the field. For example, I helped writing an article on the geopolitics of AI when I was at the Future Society, which was fascinating. I had the opportunity to dive deep and explore this topic. It was especially good to work with the mentorship of someone more experienced, such as Nicolas Niel, the founder of the Future Society. So this is one part of the job. providing input to policymakers with recommendations on how to actually make AI technology safe, as well as doing some research. Number two, my policy work has also included opportunity to organize large-scale events, such as workshops with AI researchers and major organizations like the World Economic Forum. This year, I organized the chair workshops with 150 participants. Even seemingly mundane tasks like preparing programs and researching bios for speakers can help you develop a lot of skills, knowledge, and connections. Number three, the final part of the job is keeping the machine running and helping the organization. I was the second hire at the Future Society. As a result, I got to wear many hats, everything from recruitment and strategy to organizing team meetings, social events, fundraising, and assisting our leadership with things like media outreach and research. Similarly, at Chime, I'm helping with those things, and I'm supporting Stuart Russell's work. Before I close with some advice, keep in mind that advice can be helpful, but your own judgment is what matters in the end for your career choices, even if some of those around you disagree. It's great to use effective altruism principles and ideas as a strong basis to maximize your impact. And at the same time, it's also crucial to use your own judgment and critical skills. That involves investigating the key arguments for a cause area and making up your own mind, deciding whether you want to work on this. If you want to work on AI policy, it's also important to know exactly what you're aiming for. Is it better technical standards, better testing for new products, more funding for AI safety in R&D? This will help you consolidate your own knowledge and your personal theory of how to drive impact and change. And if I can make one plug, AI governance is a rapidly emerging field with opportunities in academia, think tanks, government, corporations, and many other areas. It would be great to have more aspiring effective altruists working with us. Talking about this, seek out opportunities to demonstrate value for organizations by doing something useful for them. Don't just show your resume, show your plan for how you would streamline their event series or research strategy for the future. And go in with a plan, lay out a strategy for what you want to achieve in your role. We want to make the most of our time and resources, so make sure you know exactly what you want to bring to this role when you begin. And of course, as effective altruism incitates us to, keep your eyes on the big picture and impact. Remember what Barack Obama said to some young people a few years ago. You guys are the most privileged people at the most prosperous, secure period in human history. The possibilities of what you can do are enormous. Being useful, having a satisfying life, and making a contribution, that is entirely within your control. Thanks so much for your time. I'm excited to see where your journey and your commitment to a life of altruism takes you. Thank you.